In the heart of Silicon Valley, the name Nathaniel Hawthorne was synonymous with wealth, power, and perfection. He was a tech billionaire whose yachts were as famous as his inventions. Every corner of his life demanded precision, from his custom-designed suits to the automated systems on his private yacht, the Sea Sovereign. But on a bright spring morning, Nathaniel faced a problem no amount of money or prestige could solve. The Sea Sovereign's propulsion system had failed. It wasn't a minor glitch. The yacht refused to move beyond a slow, choppy crawl, even with full throttle. Nathaniel had already called in 100 of America's top engineers, brilliant minds from MIT, Stanford, and NASA, but none could diagnose the problem. Their simulations were flawless, their calculations meticulous, yet the yacht remained stubbornly immobile. Frustrated, Nathaniel paced the marina, his polished shoes clicking against the wooden dock. "How is this even possible?" he muttered to his assistant. "I've spent millions on this project, and these geniuses can't even make a boat move." Meanwhile, hundreds of hopeful problem solvers had applied, eager for a chance to impress the billionaire. Each was meticulously vetted, and each had failed. The story of the unsolvable yacht became a sensation in engineering circles, with blogs and tech forums buzzing about it. Halfway across the country, in a small town in Maine, David Miller was unaware of the chaos his country's wealthiest man was facing. David was a single father in his late 30s, running a small, modest boat repair shop. His hands were calloused from years of hard work, and his eyes carried the quiet patience of a man who understood machines in the most practical way possible. David's son, Luke, a curious 16-year-old, was sprawled on the garage floor, tinkering with a model boat. "Dad," he said, glancing at a news article on his phone, "did you see this? Billionaire Nathaniel Hawthorne, 100 engineers, and the yacht still doesn't work. Imagine if someone like you tried it." David chuckled, wiping grease from his hands. "Son, that's a billionaire's problem, not ours. Besides, those engineers probably have better tools than I've ever dreamed of." Luke leaned closer, excitement in his eyes. "But maybe that's exactly why you should try. You fix boats every day. You actually understand them. What if you are the one who can do it?" David smiled but shook his head. "It's not that simple, Luke. A yacht that size isn't just a bigger boat. It's a whole system of electronics, hydraulics, and fuel lines designed by a team of the smartest people in the country." But the seed was planted. That night, David couldn't shake the thought of the challenge. After putting Luke to bed, he sat at his kitchen table and drafted a careful email to Nathaniel Hawthorne, explaining his background and experience. He didn't promise miracles, just his practical approach to solving problems that others might overlook. A week later, a reply came, a direct, almost terse invitation to the billionaire's marina. David stared at the screen in disbelief. "They actually want me to try," he murmured, glancing at Luke. "I guess we're going to California." When David arrived at the marina, he felt like a fish out of water. Engineers in crisp uniforms carried tablets, diagnostic equipment, and every imaginable gadget. His own tools were simple wrenches, screwdrivers, and a few diagnostic meters he'd built himself. Nathaniel greeted him personally, leaning on the yacht's polished railing. His piercing blue eyes studied David as if trying to see through him. "So you're the guy who thinks he can fix a problem my top 100 engineers couldn't," he said, smirking. "If you're so good, then fix it. Let's see what you've got." David didn't rush. He walked slowly around the Sea Sovereign, inspecting every detail with his experienced eye. While the engineers had relied on computer simulations and complex calculations, David observed patterns and listened to the yacht's subtle sounds. He spoke with the crew, asking questions no one else had bothered to ask. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, and the engineers grew restless, whispering among themselves. "He's just a mechanic. He won't figure it out," one muttered. But David noticed something critical: a hydraulic valve slightly out of alignment and a minor airlock in the fuel line. Both were tiny details, easy to overlook but capable of stopping the entire system. With careful hands and steady concentration, he adjusted the valve, bled the airlock, and checked the connections. Finally, he stepped back and signaled to the crew. "Try it now." The yacht roared to life. The engines hummed smoothly, and the Sea Sovereign moved with a power and precision no one had seen that day. Engineers froze, mouths open, unable to comprehend the simplicity that had solved a problem their complex systems could not. Nathaniel's smirk vanished. He walked toward David, his expression a mix of disbelief and awe. I can't believe it, he said, his voice quieter than usual. How did you? David shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag. Sometimes the answer isn't in complexity. You just have to see what's really there and trust the basics. For the first time, Nathaniel Hawthorne felt humbled. The billionaire, used to commanding the best of the best, had been outsmarted by a man who didn't own a yacht or a high-profile degree, but who understood machines the way others understood money. Nathaniel extended a hand, a rare smile forming. You've got a mind money can't buy. I want to know everything about how you did this. David shook it, feeling a quiet satisfaction. He hadn't just fixed a yacht. He had shown that practical wisdom, patience, and observation could triumph over wealth and prestige. And so, in the glowing California sunset, a modest father from Maine became the man who outsmarted 100 engineers, proving that sometimes, the simplest solution is the one that works. The news of David Miller's success spread like wildfire. Within days, the story of a humble mechanic outsmarting 100 of the nation's top engineers was everywhere, from Maine's local newspapers to national tech magazines, and even late-night talk shows. Headlines shouted, "Mechanic solves billionaire's unsolvable yacht." For David, however, the attention was overwhelming. He had never sought fame or recognition. His work had always been about understanding machines and doing his best. But suddenly, people were stopping by his small workshop, curious to see the man who had humbled a billionaire. His son, Luke, watched with pride as neighbors and friends whispered excitedly about his dad. Nathaniel Hawthorne, on the other hand, was quietly transformed. The billionaire, who had always valued money and prestige above all else, realized that brilliance wasn't always measured in degrees, salaries, or certificates. It could be found in simple, observant, and patient minds. He called David to his office, a sleek room overlooking the marina, with walls lined with awards and prototypes. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel began, speaking with an unusual humility. "I've spent my life chasing innovation and brilliance, but I've ignored something important, understanding the problem first, instead of obsessing over complexity. You've reminded me of that." David smiled, leaning casually against the doorframe. Sometimes, people look for fancy solutions when the answer is right in front of them. Machines, like people, often respond best to patience, attention, and a little common sense. Nathaniel chuckled softly, a rare sound for the man used to commanding authority. "I want to learn that from you. I want you to consult for me, part-time. Teach my engineers to see, not just calculate." David paused. His life was simple but fulfilling. Maine was home, Luke needed him, and his workshop was his pride. After a long moment, he nodded. "I'll do it, but only part-time. I have responsibilities here, and my son, he's still in school." Over the next few months, David's insights began transforming Nathaniel's company. The engineers, initially skeptical of the simple-minded mechanic, gradually realized the wisdom behind David's approach. He didn't dismiss technology or data. He simply prioritized observation, listening, and intuition first. Problems that had baffled teams for weeks were suddenly solvable in days. Back in Maine, David continued running his workshop, but now with a quiet confidence that came from knowing he could hold his own against the best minds in the country. Luke watched every step, learning lessons far beyond textbooks. "Dad," Luke said one evening as they repaired an old fishing boat, "you didn't just fix a billionaire's yacht, you taught him to think differently." "That's amazing." David smiled, handing his son a wrench. "Son, brilliance isn't about who you work for or how much money someone has. It's about seeing clearly, thinking simply, and being persistent. People often make things complicated because they're afraid of missing something. But sometimes, the simplest approach works best." Nathaniel himself began inviting David to seminars and workshops, where the billionaire openly credited the mechanic for teaching him humility and practical wisdom. In these settings, David remained modest, often redirecting praise to the engineers, the crews, and his own son. Luke became an apprentice in his father's trade, absorbing not just mechanical skills, but life lessons, patience, careful observation, and respect for both machines and people. He began assisting David on smaller assignments for Nathaniel, slowly gaining confidence that would one day allow him to take over the workshop entirely. The story of David Miller also inspired countless others across the nation. People began to see that wealth, prestige, or fame weren't the only markers of intelligence. Ingenuity often came from necessity, experience, and humility. Communities began celebrating unsung heroes, people whose practical wisdom solved everyday problems that money or credentials couldn't. Years later, at a marina gala, Nathaniel gave a speech that surprised even his closest colleagues. "I have learned something invaluable," he said. "Brilliance isn't always found in the corner office, in PhD diplomas, or in high-tech laboratories. Sometimes, it's found in the hands and minds of those who work quietly, diligently, and with care." David Miller reminded me of that. The crowd erupted in applause, but David, sitting in the back with Luke by his side, simply smiled. David's legacy wasn't wealth or fame. It was the demonstration that practical knowledge, humility, and perseverance could outperform even the most educated and well-funded minds. He had proven that brilliance isn't about ego or status, it's about understanding, patience, and courage. And Luke, watching his father from the garage that evening, whispered, "One day, I'll fix yachts like you, Dad. But more importantly, I'll remember how you see the world." In a country obsessed with accolades and money, a simple mechanic from Maine had changed the way a billionaire thought, inspired a nation, and reminded everyone that sometimes, the simplest minds solve the most complex problems. Moral: true brilliance lies not in wealth or titles but in practical wisdom, patience, and the courage to trust one's own understanding, even when everyone else has failed.